10,119th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Albania, Algeria, Andorra, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Australia, Austria, Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belgium, Benin, Bhutan, the plurinational state of Bolivia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Brunei, Bulgaria, Cabo Verde, Canada, Central African Republic, Chad, Chile, Comoros, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Djibouti, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Estonia, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Fiji, Finland, Gabon, Gambia, Georgia, Germany, Ghana, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Hungary, Iceland, India, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Jamaica, Japan, Jordan, Kenya, Kiribati, Kuwait, Lebanon, Lesotho, Libya, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Maldives, Malta, Marshall Islands, Mauritania, the Federated States of Micronesia, Monaco, Montenegro, Morocco, Myanmar, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Oman, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, Peru, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, the Republic of Moldova, Romania, Rwanda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, San Marino, Sao Tome and Principe, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Serbia, Sierra Leone, Singapore, Slovakia, Slovenia, South Sudan, Spain, Sudan, Suriname, Sweden, the Syrian Arab Republic, Timor-Leste, Togo, Tonga, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Tuvalu, Uganda, Ukraine, the UAE, Tanzania, Uruguay, Uzbekistan, Vanuatu, Yemen, and Zambia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. The members of the Council have before them documents S-2026155 and S-2026159, each of which contains the text of a separate draft resolution. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the first draft resolution before it, document S-2026155. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me at the outset, on behalf of the countries of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, namely Qatar, Bahrain, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and my country, Bahrain, and Jordan, allow me to convey to you our warm gratitude for convening this important meeting. We also wish to thank the other members of the Council for their interest in this draft resolution that we are today considering. We are deeply grateful to all UN member states that co-sponsored this draft resolution. 135 countries co-sponsored this resolution, in fact. That bears witness to a collective conscience of just how dangerous the attacks staged by Iran are, that is, attacks waged against Bahrain and other countries of the GCC, as well as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan over the last 12 days. President, our region in recent years has borne witness to several dangerous attacks. These have targeted civilian infrastructure, residential areas, and this is true for many countries of the region, including my own, Bahrain. There have been many victims, namely civilian ones. Civilian infrastructure has also been largely affected. These attacks constitute a dangerous escalation that threaten peace and stability and security in the region. These attacks undermine the very principles of international law. Mr. President, the draft resolution arises from our collective belief that we need to maintain international peace and security. It is anchored in the sacred principles of the United Nations Charter and aims to address the unjust attacks waged by Iran. The draft resolution calls upon us to put an end once and for all to military operations and to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. It also calls upon all parties to uphold their commitments pursuant to international law and international humanitarian law. President, the region of the Gulf is an essential pillar for regional stability and global stability indeed, and for energy security and the security and safety of trade. These things were reaffirmed by the Security Council, namely through Resolution 525 of 2026. That resolution reaffirmed the crucial importance of our region and the need to guarantee the security of civilian infrastructure in our region. It is for this reason that protecting our region is not only a regional matter, it is rather a common international responsibility closely linked to the stability of the global economy and to the security of supply chains internationally. The draft resolution that we have before us today reflects a position of principle, one which aims to protect the sovereignty of states, enforce international law, and combat escalation, and to respect civilians and guarantee peace and security in the region. We have seen a groundswell of Council support. That needs to be the case so that the Council can send out a clear message according to which the international community remains attached to the principles of the UN Charter. We need to call for the protection of countries and their territory. Thank you.
I thank the representative for his statement. I shall first put to the vote the draft resolution contained in document S/2026/155, submitted by the following countries: Albania, Algeria, Andorra, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Australia, Austria, Bahamas, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belgium, Benin, Bhutan, Bolivia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Brunei, Bulgaria, Cabo Verde, Canada, Central African Republic, Chad, Chile, Comoros, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Denmark, Djibouti, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Estonia, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Fiji, Finland, France, Gabon, Gambia, Georgia, Germany, Ghana, Greece, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Hungary, Iceland, India, Ireland, Italy, Jamaica, Japan, Jordan, Kenya, Kiribati, Kuwait, Latvia, Lebanon, Lesotho, Liberia, Libya, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Maldives, Malta, Marshall Islands, Mauritania, the Federated States of Micronesia, Monaco, Montenegro, Morocco, Myanmar, the Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Oman, Pakistan, Palau, Panama, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, Peru, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, the Republic of Moldova, Romania, Rwanda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, San Marino, Sao Tome and Principe, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Serbia, Sierra Leone, Singapore.
In this council. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. Greece voted in favor of the resolution introduced by Bahrain on behalf of the GCC countries and Jordan, adding its voice of support to the countries in the Gulf that have been targeted by Iran in an unprecedented way. Civilians have been hit, children have been killed, energy infrastructure has been destroyed, and critical maritime routes affected. But most importantly, mutual distrust is now a permanent state of mind in the region's politics and everyday life. This is unacceptable. We have strongly condemned from the very beginning the Iranian strikes in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates and elsewhere. We are therefore pleased to be one of the first member states to co-sponsor this resolution alongside a large part of the international community. This is a moment in which the voice of the international community is being heard loud and clear in the Security Council. Mr. President, colleagues, at the same time the risks for regional and international peace and security remain exceptionally high, and we are deeply concerned by the continuing military escalation in the region. All parties must exercise maximum restraint, prevent a further spiral of violence, and work urgently to reopen credible channels of dialogue in order to achieve a durable, negotiated solution. Absent a diplomatic solution, we will face a protracted conflict and crisis with growing regional and international consequences for all. As an elected member of this Council, we reiterate, therefore, our call for de-escalation, dialogue and diplomacy. Our aim should be to find ways to return to substantial negotiations towards a peaceful settlement in line with international law and the UN Charter. Finally, as this resolution makes clear, and as a leading maritime and shipping nation, we are flagging the alarming consequences of this conflict on global trade and energy supply. The Straits of Hormuz must open again and freedom of navigation must be restored without delay. As we have said time and again, failure is not an option.
That's the sad reality. Yet, it was important to act. But there were genuine concerns that needed to be addressed. Under the circumstances, we had two proposed draft resolutions before us. I thank the representatives of Bahrain and the Russian Federation for presenting the respective draft resolutions. And Pakistan supports both the draft resolutions. Our positive vote on the draft resolution introduced by Bahrain signifies the affirmation of Pakistan's strong solidarity with the brotherly countries of Bahrain turn to negotiations, something that is consistent with Pakistan's overall position. The deplorable turn of events unfolding in the region from the initiation of elementary school in MENAB. Any use of force outside the bounds of the UN Charter is unlawful and condemnable. It is also incumbent.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. In spite of the reiterated appeals from the international community to establish an immediate cessation of the hostilities by all actors involved, the conflict continues to rage on and continues to be dangerous. Its extension, its prolongation does not only worsen the humanitarian situation, it also increases uncertainty and instability in the region and across the world. Against this backdrop, it is of concern to note the rhetoric leveled by Iran to justify actions which, on the premise of reprisals, have culminated in attacks against neighboring countries of the region and led to the closure of one of the most important maritime thoroughfares in the world, affecting the global economy. These nations have clearly and repeatedly expressed their intention to remain outside of a confrontation that they did not begin. Consequently, any attack staged against them stands as a dangerous and unjustified broadening of the conflict and an additional risk for global peace and security. With this in mind, we support the resolution presented by Bahrain on behalf of the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council and Jordan. It was a resolution co-sponsored by 135 countries. Our support came because we recognize the legitimate concerns of the states directly affected by the escalation, and we were heeding the concerns of the international community in general. The initiative reaffirms the need for countries of the GCC and Jordan to preserve their security and sovereignty, as well as their decision to not be
is the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and the basic norms governing international relations. This conflict has neither legitimacy nor legal basis. Its continuation would bring harm without any benefit. The fundamental way to prevent further deterioration of the situation is for the US and Israel to cease their military operations. At the same time, the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of the Gulf Arab states must also be fully respected. In this regard, China does not go along with Iran's attacks against the Gulf Arab states and condemns all indiscriminate attacks against innocent civilians and non-military targets. China supports the legitimate demands of the Gulf Arab states to uphold their national security, appreciates and supports their restraint, and supports the continued efforts of regional countries to resolve disputes through diplomatic means. China attaches great importance to the draft resolution presented by Bahrain on behalf of GCC countries and Jordan. We fully understand the significant concerns of the Gulf Arab states and strongly urge all parties to the conflict to genuinely respect the sovereignty and security of non-belligerent states. China participated constructively in the consultations. Regrettably, however, the draft resolution does not fully reflect the root cause and the overall picture of the conflict in a balanced manner. The reasonable suggestions by China were not adequately taken into account. Therefore, China had no choice but to abstain in the vote. President, the continuation and escalation of conflict serves the interests of no party. The only victims will be the people of the region. China once again calls for an immediate cessation of military operations, preventing further cycles of escalation and avoiding the spillover and expansion of the conflict. The parties concerned should return to the right track of dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible and resolve their differences through equal dialogue. China has always been a force for peace. Foreign Minister Wang Yi had phone conversations and calls with his counterparts of multiple countries in the region and beyond. The special envoy of the Chinese government on the Middle East issue is currently conducting shuttle diplomacy in the region, actively working to promote peace and a cessation of hostilities. China stands ready to continue working with the countries in the region and the wider international community to build synergy for peace and to promote the early restoration of peace and stability.
The A3 remains gravely concerned by the continued missile and drone attacks directed against the sovereign territories of Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates, just to name a few. These actions risk widening an already dangerous regional crisis, threatening lives and undermining broader international peace and security. We further reiterate that all member states must respect their obligations under the Charter, which unequivocally prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The A3 underscores that this Council must not endorse interpretations of Article 51 that expand the right of self-defense beyond these core principles or that risk eroding long-standing constraints on the use of force. We call for restraint, urgent de-escalation, and sustained dialogue, and to avoid action that could escalate tensions or threaten, I should say, further threaten regional peace and stability. We are also concerned by actions that impede freedom of navigation or threaten maritime security in international waterways all around the world. Such conduct carries severe global humanitarian, economic, and energy security consequences and must cease. The A3 further stresses the urgent need to return to negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program. A credible diplomatic process remains essential to preventing further escalation and to achieving sustainable peace and security in the region. It is important to seize this moment to redouble our efforts to de-escalate and support a diplomatic process that can deliver peace, stability, and security for all states in the Middle East. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 stands ready to support all efforts within this Council and in cooperation with regional and international partners to facilitate dialogue, reduce tensions, and promote a peaceful, inclusive, and lasting resolution to the situation in the Middle East. We reaffirm our solidarity with the peoples of the region and our unwavering commitment to the Charter and to international peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Liberia for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, President. Latvia voted in favour and co-sponsored the resolution submitted by Bahrain on behalf of the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council and Jordan. We express our full solidarity with Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and other affected countries that are victims of the unprovoked attacks by the Iranian regime. We appreciate the Council listening to their concerns, just as it should listen to other states facing unprovoked aggression. Latvia welcomes the clear focus of the resolution on respect for the United Nations Charter and international law, as well as the timely description of violations of these fundamental principles by the Iranian regime. We recall that these aggressive and destabilizing acts follow a long series of attempts by the Iranian regime and its proxies to challenge international law and both regional and global peace and security. And we underline the constructive and reasoned manner in which this resolution was drafted and commend the good work of Bahrain amid this trying time of unjust aggression. It is a very clear and strong message of this Council, supported by 135 UN member states, and we welcome its adoption. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, Colombia notes with deep concern the situation in the Middle East and the rising spiral of violence arising from the unilateral attacks and unjustified attacks waged across the region, including the most recent illegal attack and the irresponsible attack, indeed, waged against the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was put forward by Israel and the United States. This is one more stage of the genocide unleashed by the Netanyahu regime more than 2 years ago against the Palestinian people, and an expression of an expansionist project, an expression of the systematic and violation of international law and of the lack of consequences and accountability for those responsible. Colombia also notes with grave concern the attacks and attempts to invade the sovereign territory of Lebanon and that of other states in the region. My delegation decided to vote in favor of this resolution as a demonstration of solidarity with Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Kuwait, and Oman. However, we cast that vote pursuant to our historic multilateral position of principle. We stringently comply with international law and the United Nations Charter. We reaffirm our support for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of all countries of the region. Colombia is of the view that what the region urgently needs is the immediate cessation of hostilities. It needs to see the spiral of violence halted, and there needs to be space forged for a process of broad dialogue between the regional stakeholders, such as to tackle the root causes of this crisis and to move towards a long-term, lasting political solution for the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President, and let me also thank the Kingdom of Bahrain for its efforts as penholder on this draft resolution. The large number of co-sponsors from within this Council and across the whole membership demonstrates the collective desire to end Iran's strikes against countries in the region and bring peace to the Middle East, and it sends a powerful message. Mr. President, Denmark is deeply concerned by the continued escalation of the situation in the Middle East. In a short time, we have seen a large number of countries in the Gulf, the Middle East, and Europe being drawn into this conflict that they have no stakes in. Every day passing, we are witnessing a further destabilization of the already volatile and tense situation. We call for maximum restraint, protection of civilians, and respect for international law, including international humanitarian law. We call for diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions. Denmark strongly condemns Iran's continued attacks on countries in the region.
We express our full solidarity with all the countries concerned. Mr. President, at this crucial moment, it is imperative to listen to the voices of the region. Iran must immediately cease its attacks and respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states and ensure maritime security and respect for the freedom of navigation. This is why Denmark co-sponsored and voted in favor of this resolution, which we are pleased the Council has adopted. Denmark remains committed to safeguarding peace, security, and stability in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the Russian Federation abstained during the voting of the draft resolution submitted by Bahrain. We did this because it's extremely unbalanced and does not meet the purpose of maintaining international peace and security. Let me state from the outset, we do understand and regret the situation in which Middle Eastern countries find themselves in today. More than that, Russia thinks it's unacceptable to strike the territory, and in particular the civilian infrastructure of the Arab states in the Persian Gulf. The leadership of my country, and personally President Putin, from the very first days joined with the efforts to de-escalate, to stop the bloodshed in Iran and around it. But talking about attacks against countries in the region in isolation from the root causes of the current escalation, specifically the aggression by the United States and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran, is impossible and it is unfair. To our deep regret, the resolution that just passed is expressed exactly in this kind of biased and one-sided tone. It muddles up the cause and effect. And if someone who is not well-versed in international affairs reads this, then this person will be left with the impression that Tehran, on its own volition and out of malice, conducted an unprovoked attack on Arab states. The attacks against the territory of Iran itself, not to mention those who are behind them and carrying them out, are not only not condemned in the document, they're just simply left out. And the Security Council has just signed off to that. Nor is it being mentioned the fact that the authorities in Tehran underscored repeatedly that their retaliation are not against the country specifically, but the American military facilities and infrastructure on their territory, and are legitimate targets within Iran's right to self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter. We must also point out that Washington, through their aggressive action, essentially just exposed the Gulf states. The Americans ignored their repeated requests not to use the territory of the Arab states to conduct military operations against Iran. According to the information from open sources, the United States actively are using for the purposes, though, areas of the permanent deployment of their armed forces, first and foremost in the Persian Gulf monarchies. And this is being done not for defensive or intelligence gathering purposes, but for offensive purposes. The official site of the American CENTCOM on the 28th of February already, with a reference to its head, Brett Cooper, it was stated that high-precision weaponry against Iran was launched not just from sea and air, but also from land. It is clear that this could only mean the territory of those states which are neighboring Iran. It is not a secret for anyone that the American base in Bahrain is the headquarters and the nerve center of the Fifth Fleet of the United States, which is the main strike force against Iran. The U.S. Air Force Base Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia is the main maintenance point for U.S. Air Force. A major Air Force base, Irritated in Qatar, could be used not just as a major element of the global air defense and NATO global system air defense, but also to deploy the attack fighters, bombers, and refueling planes, and also so as to suppress air defense and for target acquisition. For these purposes, and also to collect intelligence information, the Al Dhafra base in UAE is very suitable. An important role in carrying out the military operation against Iran is being played by the American bases in Kuwait, Jordan, and Iraq. All of this is being mentioned by Iran in explaining, justifying their strikes against American military facilities in the Arab countries. The absolute imperative need to protect civilians and infrastructure under the conditions of the current conflict in this resolution is also presented in a very one-sided way. Strikes against civilians and civilian infrastructure are not acceptable under any circumstances in any country, not in Iran, not in Bahrain, not in Jordan, not in Qatar, not in Kuwait, not in Oman, not in Saudi Arabia, not in the United Arab Emirates, not in Israel. But the GCC draft could lead one to conclude that no one hit the peaceful citizens of Iran. It's as though the horrible strike against the girls' school in Menab did not happen. The result of that was almost 200 children killed. There was no cynical murder of the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as though there had been no strikes against a peaceful nuclear and oil infrastructure which could lead to catastrophic consequences, not just economic ones, and for the citizens, not just Iran and neighboring countries, but also for states beyond the Middle East. The sponsors of the draft just suggested that we close our eyes to this unlawful action and unprovoked aggression against Iran by United States and Israel. Since the very beginning, working on the text, the Russian Federation, together with our Chinese colleagues, have consistently been conveying these concerns to Arab states. We voiced them in the course of informal consultations, and we also provided the co-sponsors and all other members of the Council our written comments and suggestions. Specifically, we propose the following. First of all, that we call upon all the parties to the current conflict to stop the strike. Second, that we condemn the strikes not only against the countries of the Gulf, but also against the territory of Iran. And we express regret having to do with the attacks against civilian facilities, which resulted in the death of civilians and the supreme leader of Iran, and express solidarity with the people of Iran in this difficult time. Third, demand that all states reject provocations or any action that could lead to further escalation. Additionally, we spoke in favor of confirming the need to settle any disputes using peaceful means, and a balanced statement pointing to the fact that the right to self-defense under the Charter is something that the Arab states and also Iran have. At the same time, despite the principled position of my country, in particular the categorical condemnation of the aggression by the United States and Israel, we try to make sure that our language was as restrained as possible without naming the initiators of the current crisis, without calling them by name. When we were working on this document, we were guided by just one consideration, objectivity. But the authors of the draft resolution simply ignored the position of Russia and China. We are most disappointed by the fact that there was a rejection to include into the text the appeal to the political and diplomatic settlement of the conflict. This was done without any explanations provided, as though we were just saying in a vacuum. We think that such an approach to working on the outcomes of the Security Council is not constructive. It's irresponsible, and it is unfitting for the responsible members of the Council. Mr. President, passing such a resolution cannot lead us to peace in the region of Middle East. It will worsen the differences between the key players in the region. And we are worried that the GCC countries, as they try to condemn Iran, could end up crossing out all of the recent accomplishments in trying to restore good faith relations with Tehran and push away for many years a prospect of creating a common security space for the entire region. Furthermore, the positive decision of the Council on this document we just had could be interpreted by bad faith actors, and first and foremost by those who started this war, as a blessing to continue aggression actions against Iran. And we appeal to all UN members to understand this. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Colleagues, as we woke this morning, civilians, families, children were trapped, sheltering in bunkers all over the Middle East. They were wondering if the only thing they could count on today were more missiles and more drones from the Iranian regime. They could not be certain whether they would have the support of the international community. They couldn't be certain if they would have the support of the United Nations Security Council, which frankly in years past has failed to speak out about Iran's consistent and grotesque violations of international law. Well, to the people under the barrage and the constant bombardment of the Iranian regime, the UN Security Council stands with you. 135 countries stand with you. We uniformly condemn Iran's indiscriminate attacks on civilians. Today you've heard and you'll continue to hear lies, as you always have, from the representative from Iran and their friends on the council. This time claiming that all of their strikes have been against U.S. military bases or various types of military installation. But here's the hard truth. Here's what they don't want you to hear. And this is common sense, colleagues. The Fairmont Hotel in Dubai, that's not a military base or installation. That's why dozens and dozens of tourists have fled as it was set on fire. Tourists from the United Kingdom, from Liverpool, from other countries, all trying to vacation there, do business there. The civilian airport in Dubai, a global hub of commerce and tourism, also coming under fire. That's not a military installation. At 90 years old, Bahrain's only oil refinery, that's not a military target. Qatar's natural gas facilities that power the economies of the world, those weren't military targets. Even Oman, who until recently was trying to find a diplomatic solution, it's been hit too. Its ports are not military targets. The cargo ships that are being attacked and set aflame, many of them carrying food and other supplies around the world, one of them from Thailand. Those aren't military targets. So look, these attacks were so brutal and so indiscriminate as Iran shoots in all directions that nations that previously had serious disagreements have now joined together. They've now spoken as one voice. Iran's strategy of sowing chaos, of trying to hold their neighbors hostage, trying to shake the resolve of the region, has clearly backfired, and that was shown by this vote today. The Kingdom of Bahrain, itself a victim of these attacks, drafted this resolution, led the negotiations on this resolution. Our allies and partners from across the region, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and the United Arab Emirates supported it, as well as a record a UN Security Council record number of co-sponsors, 135, and we read every one of them today so that the entire world could hear it. This is exactly what the United Nations should be about. Today's action is a direct and unequivocal statement from the Gulf countries condemning the brutality of the Iranian regime, whose practice of targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure is reprehensible, and the entire world is calling it out for what it is. Iran is indiscriminately attacking innocent families and civilians living in countries spanning Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Cyprus, Azerbaijan, Jordan, Iraq, and Turkey. All have felt the consequences of Iran's missiles, drones, and attacks. This council and the international community must speak plainly and be honest with the world about Iran's long history of undermining international peace and security, and for decades, and we all know this, Iran has supported terrorist violence against civilians around the world, and as we all just saw in recent months, massacred its own people. In order to maintain its iron grip on power, the Iranian regime exported instability abroad, turning neighbors like Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Gaza into battlegrounds and leaving them no hope of peace or prosperity. Earlier today in this council, I challenge any one of you, anyone in the world, to show me a country that is better off because of Iran's intervention and instability. This is why the UN has voted in resolution after resolution that the Iranian regime must never and can never have a nuclear weapon. And by constantly refusing to comply with international safeguards that all of our countries support, Iran's nuclear program was barreling towards a nuclear disaster. The IAEA made clear that there was no reason to have nearly 1,000 pounds of 60% highly enriched uranium unless you wanted to build a nuclear bomb. And no one in this chamber can be surprised by Iran's promise of death to Israel, death to America, and with nuclear weapons, death to the world. And at an emergency meeting in January, not long ago, we raised the Islamic Republic of Iran's decades-old campaign of repression, subjecting its young and old alike to violence, torture, and censorship. Colleagues, the Iranian regime's abuses are a stain for all who tolerate it, drawn from the blood of their victims. President Trump and his team exhausted every attempt at diplomatic negotiations. He sought peace and to end 47 years of hostility and attacks, while Iran only sought more missiles, more drones, and a pathway to nuclear Armageddon. President Trump has drawn his red line here. Iran crossed it once again, and now the world is facing the consequences. And these consequences that the United States does not bring alone. We are grateful to our partners, Bahrain, who have bravely pushed this resolution forward. We are grateful to the 135 countries that co-sponsored it, and we will never hesitate to hold the Iranian regime to account for its continuing threats to international peace and security. I thank you. I will now resume my duties as Council President. The representative of Bahrain has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President, I apologize for asking to take the floor again. I would like to express sadness for what was involved and what was mentioned by the representative of the Russian Federation regarding GCC member states. I would like to clarify that GCC countries have proposed and exerted a lot of mediation and diplomatic efforts. We have never been territories from which attacks were launched, and our territories were never used to attack other countries. I speak to you now while sirens are sounding in our countries and in the region, and therefore the Iranian claims are refuted by the facts, because the attacks continue, and they continue against civilian facilities and against civilians. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the second draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we have already mentioned today the non-constructive nature of the resolution, which was just endorsed today with a condemnation of strikes by Iran against countries in the region, which is one-sided, and we were not convinced of the opposite by the statement just made by the representative of Bahrain. Right now, the Russian Federation is calling upon members of the Security Council to pass an impartial document aimed at urgently de-escalating the situation. This will allow the Council to discharge its direct responsibility to maintain international peace and security. The draft that my country prepared leaves outside of the equation the differences amongst members of the Council on the reasons for the current unprecedented tension in the Middle East. It is simple, it's direct, and it's unequivocal in nature, and it has 4 operative paragraphs. The first one urges all parties to immediately stop their military activities and refrain from any steps which could lead to further escalation in the Middle East and beyond. The second one firmly condemns any strikes against civilian infrastructure and underscoring the obligations of all parties under international law, including international humanitarian law. 3, it underlines the importance of ensuring security of all states without exception in the region. And 4, it strongly encourages all parties concerned to immediately return to a negotiating table without any further delay. When we are convinced that all of these elements fully reflect the opinions of Security Council members related to current events, including those opinions that were voiced during Security Council meeting on the 20th of February. At the same time, when we're preparing the text, we intentionally did not name any of the parties. We understand very well that such an approach would have made consensus impossible, and as a consequence would impede the Council in sending a signal of principal importance for the need of immediate de-escalation and for restraint on the part of all conflicting parties. As we're working on the text, the Russian Federation disseminated a document for written comments from members of the Council and also conducted in-person informal consultations. We note that not a single delegation expressed any objections or concerns as regards the text of the text. In this context, we count on all colleagues to demonstrate responsibility and will support the Russian draft, which could become a timely and urgently needed step for a political and diplomatic settlement of the situation in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I shall now put to the vote the draft resolution contained in document S/2026/159 submitted by the Russian Federation. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2026/159 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows: 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 9 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom's priority is restoring regional stability in the Middle East as soon as possible and preventing this crisis escalating further. Iran's ongoing reckless attacks against countries across the region threaten to expand the conflict. That's why the UK voted in favour of the resolution tabled by Bahrain condemning Iran's attacks against the territories of its neighbours. That text was grounded in the facts and backed by the region, responding directly to the needs of our partners in the Gulf and Jordan. It focused squarely on protecting civilians and restoring regional stability, and we're pleased that this Council was able to send a clear condemnation of Iran's reckless attacks by adopting that resolution. By contrast, this Russian resolution does nothing to address the concerns of those in the region who have faced unprovoked and unjustifiable attacks. And it is impossible to overlook the hypocrisy of Russia presenting itself here as a guardian of international peace and security. It continues to reject Ukraine's proposal for a ceasefire. It attacks Ukraine's civilian infrastructure night after night. With the very same Iranian-designed Shahed drones that are now striking targets across the Middle East and beyond. In return for Iran's support, Russia has provided Iran with advanced military capabilities, increasing the threat that Iran poses to the region. We should be in no doubt where Russia stands in this conflict. So Russia's resolution would have only served to distract this Council from the serious work required to end the conflict. That is why the UK did not support the resolution. Our collective priority must be to secure stability in the region and the protection of civilian life. That's what the UK government has been focusing on and will continue to do alongside our allies, including in this Council. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, France did not support the draft resolution presented by Russia on the situation in the Middle East. As I previously stated when I explained our vote on the draft resolution tabled by Bahrain and adopted by an overwhelming majority, France is gravely concerned by the fact that the war in the Middle East continues to rumble on. We share the belief expressed by myriad members of this Council that the military escalation is not in the interest of the region, that respect for international law is the prerequisite par excellence for long-term stability, and that hostilities must stop without delay. We also call for the safeguarding of human life and for the respect of international humanitarian law. Mr. President, while it may claim to have the most noble intentions, the draft text circulated by Russia did not constitute a vital basis around which to bring the Council to find consensus, and it did not meet this crisis with the response it required. The results of the vote lay that fact bare. Elsewhere, the draft resolution said nothing about the overwhelming responsibility shouldered by Iran in the current escalation, including by waging indiscriminate and unjustified attacks against its regional neighbors, which posed no threat to Iran. What was said by the Russian Federation to justify its vote on Resolution 2817 incidentally marked a form of understanding on the part of that country of the Iranian strikes. And yet, Iran for years has visited threats upon its regional environment and on international peace and security. It does so through the network of militia that it finances, or controls and trains in the region. It does it through its ballistic missile programs and its nuclear program. Incidentally, the IAEA is not able to guarantee the peaceful nature of that program. And that, let us recall, is against the backdrop of its pure and simple denial, unacceptable refusal to accept the very existence of that program. The stability of the region can only be guaranteed in the long term if these threats are addressed. Mr. President, it is through diplomacy and with diplomacy alone that the region's security and stability can be guaranteed in the long term. In order for diplomacy to prevail, Iran must heed the call issued by Resolution 2817. Iran must agree to enter into negotiations in good faith to conclude a negotiated oversight of its ballistic missile and nuclear programs as well as of its regional activities. France will continue to mobilize to achieve such a negotiated solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, the draft resolution proposed by Russia reaffirms the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. It urges all parties to immediately cease military actions, condemns all attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, and encourages all parties to return to the track of diplomatic negotiations. Its content is principled and balanced, which China welcomes and supports. We are disappointed and regret that the draft was not adopted. This is a war that should not have happened, and a war that benefits no one. The history of the Middle East has repeatedly shown the world that the use of force is not the solution to problems. Armed conflicts only breed new hatred and sow the seeds of fresh crisis. The pressing priority is to immediately stop military operations, prevent the escalation and spread of hostilities, and return to dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible. China will continue to make efforts to strive for peace. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
I thank you, Mr. President. The Kingdom of Bahrain wishes to sincerely thank the Russian Federation, that friendly country, for its initiative in terms of proposing that draft resolution on the dangerous escalation in the region of the Middle East. We commend that initiative. It reflects the Russian Federation's concern and its desire to contribute to responding to events in the region. We welcome the efforts taken. However, we abstained from the vote, and we did not support the draft resolution. That was because that draft resolution has adopts a general tone which in no way reflects the dangerous military escalation currently besetting the region. And that is as a result of the attacks waged by Iran, unjustified attacks. Attacks which we must condemn in the strongest terms, attacks which have affected my country and other countries that are members of the GCC as well as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. These attacks are a threat and a violation of the good neighbourly relations policy and of the sovereignty of states. They are also violations of the United Nations Charter and of international law. In view of our responsibilities as countries directly concerned by the situation in the region, we have a preference for giving priority to draft resolutions which we proposed on behalf of the GCC and Jordan. Resolutions which deal with current events in more precise and realistic ways. That reflects the nature of security challenges facing the countries in the region. With that in mind, we count on the support of the international community for the draft resolution that we proposed, and that was just adopted. We express our deep appreciation for all countries which co-sponsored that draft resolution on behalf of 135 countries. This overwhelming support from the international community reflects a collective awakening to the threat that is posed by Iran. A threat that our countries have been a victim of over the last many years. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
President, Denmark abstained on the draft resolution presented by Russia today, as Denmark does not consider that the Russian Federation introduced this resolution in good faith. The resolution put forward by the Kingdom of Bahrain represent a genuine effort to respond to the concerns of the region and contribute meaningfully to de-escalation in the Middle East. That resolution, which the Council has just adopted, has a clear operational focus guided by the region, which should be the direction of our collective efforts. We regret that, rather than being guided by the voices of the region, and indeed by the overwhelming support expressed across the wider UN membership, the Russian Federation has instead chosen to table a new text that diverts the Council attention away from that broad support. It is well known that Iran for years has been destabilizing factor in the region and beyond. Now, the regime in Tehran continues its destructive behavior by attacking countries in the region, including civilians and civilian objects, disrupting maritime security, and threatening regional stability, international peace and security, and the global economy. None of this is reflected in Russia's draft resolution. For this reason, Denmark did not support the resolution presented by Russia today. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, President. Latvia voted against the resolution submitted by the Russian Federation for the following reasons. Latvia unequivocally supports the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations recalled in this text, including the prohibition of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, as well as the international law, including international humanitarian law, protecting civilians and civilian infrastructure. And we share the deep concern regarding the current escalation of hostilities in the Middle East and beyond. However, we could not support the presented draft, as it was tabled by a permanent member of this Council, which itself is violating daily for years the very principles it now calls upon others to respect. The aggression, use of force against territorial integrity and political independence, continued attacks against civilian infrastructure and civilians carried out by Russia in Ukraine stand in total contradiction to the commitments invoked in this draft. It is cynical and represents hypocrisy of the highest order. Iran is now attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure in the region and beyond with the same weapons it is supplying to Russia to attack civilians in Ukraine. So we agree this is not a resolution submitted in good faith, and despite our agreement with the values and objectives outlined in the text, Latvia was compelled to vote against. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we're deeply disappointed by the fact that the Security Council today failed to pass such a resolution, such a much-demanded one, which focused on the need to de-escalate in the Middle East and to return to looking for negotiated solutions. We would like to express our appreciation to those colleagues which spoke in favor of the document Russia presented. We think that their behavior was responsible and principled, as befits members of the Security Council. Unfortunately, some of the colleagues did not manage to muster enough strength and wisdom within them to make the only correct decision, and many of them did it deliberately, because the main thing for them is to march in step with their elder brother and to listen to that brother's commands. They have just rejected the possibility for the Council to send an unequivocal demand to immediately stop hostilities and settle any and all disputes peacefully. And this shows very clearly, yet once again, that all of the loud statements on the part of those countries about how committed they are to international law, UN Charter, peace, are nothing more than empty rhetoric. Their position is dictated purely by their short-term political interests, bloc solidarity, and the fear that they might fall out of favor with their elder friends. More than that, it is for these reasons that they prepared to continue further undermining the authorities of the Council. It is very telling that neither one of the delegations who spoke against or abstained during the voting did not manage to explain what it is that they found objectionable in our text. And the routine statements, such as the need to focus on the resolution which was put forward by Bahrain and the GCC countries, does not withstand any criticism. The Russian draft was in no way contradictory to the documents submitted by the countries of the region. It did not contain anything that was mutually exclusive in relation to that. Therefore, such words is just an absurd attempt to justify their fear to speak in support of the initiative, regardless of how balanced and depoliticized it is, only because it does not benefit those who truly provoke the bloody events in the Middle East. And what is even more dangerous is that what's behind their decision are other geopolitical goals, and the responsibility for any negative consequences on the ground that will come in the wake of partiality and responsibility of members of the Council rests entirely with them. That voting was a litmus test and, forgive me, an invitation to show your true colors. And we are very curious to find out, do those countries which did not support the resolution, did not understand how pathetic they look? We've already mentioned that this is not even double standards. This is surreal. This is living in the through-the-looking-glass world. And it's just a disgrace. We are going to now remind you of that when in other situations you will try to present themselves as advocates of international law. Regardless of the outcome of the voting today, Russia will continue making all efforts possible for the as quickly as possible end to the confrontation in the Middle East and settling any differences using peaceful means. And we will help the countries in the region and all countries in the conflict. And we count on a similar approach on the part of reasonable and constructively minded member states.
I thank the representative of Russia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Colleagues, the Russian Federation knew it did not have the votes to adopt its resolution today, yet it insisted on proceeding to a vote. And once again, Russia is acting here at the Security Council to protect its partner, Iran. We reject Russia's attempt to conflate lawful U.S. actions taken in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter, to conflate those actions with Iran's pattern of bloodshed and brutality to its own people and around the world, and with its recent deliberate and at scale targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure across the Gulf and the Middle East. The United States will continue to work here at this council and beyond to hold the Iranian regime to account and to bring to light its destabilizing and unlawful actions. Russia's attempts to prevent this council from acting in line with its core principles will not deter us. I thank you, and I resume my function as president of the council, and I now give the floor to the representative of Iran under Rule 37.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, colleagues, at the outset, I must express our profound regret over the Council's action today. This is a deeply regrettable day for the Security Council and for the international community. Today's adoption is a serious setback to the Council's credibility and leaves a lasting stain on its record. Today's action represents a blatant misuse of the Security Council mandate in pursuit of the political agendas of the certain members. The very state responsible for the brutal war of aggression against my country, the regime of the United States, sits on the other side of this chamber as President of the Council, abusing its position while obstructing every effort to bring an end to this barbaric war against the Iranian people and preventing the Council from fulfilling its charter-based responsibilities. Let me make it clear. This resolution is a manifest injustice against my country, the main victim of a clear act of aggression. It distorts the realities on the ground and deliberately ignores the root causes of the current crisis. The very purpose of this biased and politically motivated text, which was pushed by Israeli regime and the United States, is clear: to reverse the roles and position of victims and aggressors. It rewards the regimes of the United States and Israel, which have violated the UN Charter and committed acts of aggression. In doing so, it established impunity and sent a wrong message to the international community, emboldening the aggressors to commit further crimes. Accordingly, we do not recognize the Council's action today. We consider it unjust and unlawful, inconsistent with the United Nations Charter and international law, and an action that completely disregards the established principles governing determination of acts of aggression and breach of the peace. Make no mistake, today it is Iran, tomorrow it could be any other sovereign state. We thank Russia and China for their constructive efforts. Those members that voted in favor of this resolution, particularly the European members of the Council, including France, United Kingdom, Greece, Denmark, and Latvia, have demonstrated that their repeated claims of defending the UN Charter and the principles of the international law are nothing more than empty words and hollow rhetoric. These members lacked even the minimal courage to acknowledge the perpetrators of the aggression, Israel and the United States. While concerning the violation of the Charter and international law and speaking of the international peace and security, by deliberately ignoring the flagrant violation of the most fundamental principles of the UN Charter, the prohibition of the use of force, these members have once again shown that for them respect for the Charter and international law is selective and subordinate to political agenda. The hypocritical and irresponsible conduct once again demonstrate that political consideration take precedence over their professed commitment to international law and the UN Charter. It is evident that these countries are simply implementing political instruction from Washington rather than exercising independent judgment and decision. Regrettably, some members distorting the reality and facts on the grounds and made a cynical and blatant attempt to blame Iran and accuse and condemn Iran while ignoring the root causes of the current situation, whitewashing the U.S. and Israeli heinous crimes and military aggression, especially the massacre of 170 school girls in Minab, as it was Iran that initiated this war. We categorically and strongly reject all the baseless and politically motivated accusations made by some members against my country, which are entirely devoid of any legal foundation. The aim of this accusation is clear: to distort the reality, deflect the attention of the international community from war crimes and crimes against humanity that have been and are being committed against the people of Iran by the Israeli regime and the United States. But the facts prove otherwise and speak loudly and clearly. Against this backdrop, I now wish to emphasize the following points. First, the root cause of the current situation are clear and simple. On 28 February, the United States and Israel regime launched a military attack against the Islamic Republic of Iran in flagrant violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter and the parliamentary norm prohibiting aggression. This is an illegal, illegitimate, and unprovoked war began with the cowardly terrorist assassination of the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the highest official of the sovereign member state of the United Nations, along with several senior state officials, and resulted in the deaths and injuries of thousands of civilians. This aggression was accompanied by coordinated attacks on both military and civilian infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, residential buildings, sports facilities, public service centers, and relief facilities across the country. These acts constitute grave violation of international law and serious breach of international humanitarian law. Senior officials of the aggressor states, including the President of the United States and criminal Prime Minister of Israel, have publicly acknowledged and justified this attack, thereby openly admitting responsibility for this unlawful act of aggression. Since 28 February, the continued military strike by the United States and the Israeli regime have martyred more than 1,348 civilians, including women and children, more than 17,000 civilians injured, and destroyed or damaged 19,734 civilian sites. These include 16,191 residential homes, 1,617 commercial and service centers, 77 medical and pharmaceutical facilities, 65 schools and educational institutions, 16 Red Cross buildings, and multiple energy infrastructure facilities. The scale and systematic nature of this attack clearly constitute war crimes and crime against humanity. Second, in response to this deliberate and unjustified aggression, the Islamic Republic of Iran has exercised and continues to exercise its inherent right of self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in light of the failure of the United Nations Security Council to discharge its duty and responsibilities under the Charter of the United Nations, has undertaken necessary and proportionate defensive operation against the bases and facilities of the aggressors in the region. Such actions are lawful under international law and have been clearly and repeatedly warned of in advance through various channels and at different levels. Our response is lawful, necessary, and proportionate. Iran targets only the military objective of the aggressors. Our assessment indicates that some of these incidents may have resulted from interception by the United States defense system, which could have diverted from intended military targets. Third, since the beginning of this aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran by the United States and Israeli regime, the aggressors have also used the territories and facilities of certain third states in the region to launch unlawful military attack. Under the fundamental principle of international law, states are prohibited from knowingly allowing their territory to be used directly or indirectly to cause damage to other states. In addition, UN General Assembly Resolution 3314 of 14 December 1974, Article 3F, has clearly categorized and recognized that the action of a state in allowing its territory, which it has placed at the disposal of another state, to be used by that state for perpetrating an act of aggression against the third state as an act of aggression. Furthermore, as a principle of international law emanating from the jus cogens character of the prohibition of aggression, states must undertake all necessary measures to prevent foreign armed forces based in their territory from committing acts of aggression against other states and must not facilitate or support such acts. It is evident that in the event of the breach of this fundamental obligation, a state whose territory has been used to carry out acts of aggression against a third state bears international legal responsibility, including responsibility for reparation of direct and indirect damage resulting from such attack. Similarly, the measures claimed to have been taken by the United Kingdom and certain other states outside the region under pretext of a so-called right of individual or collective self-defense are devoid of any legal basis and are wholly unjustifiable under international law. Such action may themselves constitute acts of aggression. Moreover, these states have deliberately refrained from identifying the original aggressors, namely the United States and Israeli regime, and have in effect attempted to reverse the roles of victims and aggressor. Fourth, the aggressors, in particular the United States, are under an obligation to make full reparation for the injury caused by the ongoing violation against Iran and its citizens, including any damage incurred. Furthermore, the individual criminal responsibility of the President of the United States and any other U.S. official and individuals involved in grave breach of international humanitarian law, including for directing deliberate attack against civilians and launching willful attacks against civilian objects, is beyond doubt. Fifth, the Islamic Republic of Iran remains committed to maintaining friendly relations with the countries in the Persian Gulf region based on mutual respect, the principle of good neighborliness, and respect for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Iran re-emphasized that its defense operation targeting United States military bases and facilities in the region are in no way against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the regional countries. Also, the Israeli regime has succeeded in dragging the United States into a regional conflict. Iran's relations with neighbors are rooted in long-standing historical, cultural, and geographical ties. Once the current tension diminish, Iran and its neighbors countries will inevitably return to their traditional relation of cooperation, mutual respect, and good neighborliness. Iran, as a co-founder of the UN and responsible member, has consistently honored its obligation, respected international law and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and the claim that Iran has closed the strait is simply untrue. Meanwhile, Iran will never abandon its right under international law to protect its sovereignty, territorial integrity, national and vital interests as it deems necessary. Sixth, the Council must confront the real source of the threat to the regional and international peace and security and act without delay to stop this bloody war against the Iranian people. It must compel the aggressors, the United States and Israel, to immediately cease all military attacks against Iran, including against civilians, and civilian infrastructure and ensure full accountability for these grave violations of international humanitarian law and war crimes. Thank you.
The representative of Iran made a statement. I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the past day, the Iranian regime has fired missiles and drones not only at Israel, but across the region, at Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Cyprus. And this is what the regime is doing before it has nuclear weapons. Imagine what it would do if it had them. This is not just about the joint US-Israel campaign. This is a regime attacking its neighbors. That is why we welcome the initiative of the Gulf Cooperation Council states condemning these attacks. Their message is clear. Targeting civilians is wrong. Targeting cities is wrong. And Iran must stop. But what we are seeing today did not begin 2 weeks ago for Israel. It did not begin on February 28. It did not begin last year during the 12-day war. It began all the way back in 1979, when the regime in Tehran made the destruction of the US and Israel parts of its mission, ideology. For 47 years, this regime has armed terror organizations across the Middle East. It has spread violence across the region. It has targeted Israeli civilians through cowardly proxy attacks. And today, it races toward nuclear capability while building the missiles to deliver it. This is not a new crisis. It is a result of decades of aggression. For decades, the international community tried diplomacy. Negotiations were attempted. Channels remained open, but diplomacy requires honesty, not what we just heard from the representative from Iran. Iran used diplomacy as cover. While diplomats spoke, centrifuges span. While negotiations were held, the regime fortified its nuclear program. Facilities were buried deep underground. Complexes were carved into mountains to shield them from consequences. At the same time, Iran rebuilt its ballistic missile program. Before this joint operation began, Iran was again producing dozens of ballistic missiles every month. Missiles capable of carrying warheads weighing up to 1 ton. Missiles capable of reaching targets across the Middle East and even to parts of Europe. Iran has enriched uranium to 60%. It possesses more than 460 kilograms at that level alone, an amount when they negotiated with Special Envoy Witkoff, they admitted that they have this amount and they can produce 11 nuclear bombs. They confirmed they control this stockpile, and that was the starting point of the negotiation position. No civilian nuclear program requires enrichment to 60%. None. And peaceful nuclear programs do not hide critical facilities deep inside mountains. Yet here, at the UN, we hear a very different story. We just heard a very long speech. The representative of Iran tells us their nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Ambassador Ravani says Iran is only targeting military sites. You just heard him. He said it. Mr. President, that is simply not true. Mr. Ravani, you and your regime are lying to all of us. You say you are only targeting military targets. How can you say that? We are not stupid. I know it. I know it because your missiles target cities in Israel where my daughters are now, where my mother lives. And the representatives from the Gulf states sitting here today can tell you the same thing. They have seen the cowardly attacks on civilians, airports. Iranian missiles and drones have struck ports, infrastructure, hotels across the region. These are not military targets. These are civilian sites. And you think if you write a letter every day repeating the same lies, people will start to believe you. It will not work for you. Over the past week, Iran's representative has sent letter after letter to the Security Council. In fact, here they are, 15 letters, one at least every day, each repeating the same accusations, letters that even blame Israel and the US. You know, you have the audacity to call us terrorists. Mr. Iravani, before making such accusations, you might want to look in the mirror. The regime you represent fires missiles at civilians across the region and then writes letters claiming victimhood. The only letter you should write is an apology to the Iranian people, and maybe after you should request a political asylum. That's the only letter you should write. Mr. President, peaceful regimes do not enrich uranium to 60% and stockpile hundreds of kilograms of it. Peaceful regimes do not hide nuclear facilities deep inside mountains. And peaceful regimes do not build ballistic missiles capable of carrying 1-ton warheads across the region and into Europe. Israel remains committed to protecting our people, defending our region, and ensuring that the Iranian regime never acquires nuclear weapons. Thank you.
I thank the representative for the statement. I shall now make a further statement in my capacity as a representative of the United States. And in that regard, I want to be perfectly clear and polite that there has been some misrepresentation here today, so I just want to clear one thing up. The accusation that this resolution put forward by the Kingdom of Bahrain, supported by every member of the GCC, and I see all of them here today, and supported by 135 countries, the most co-sponsors of a UN Security Council resolution ever, was somehow manipulated by one or two countries is laughable. We urge Iran to hear the voice of the Council, of this resolution that saw no opposition today, and of the entire international community. But more importantly, we urge Iran to listen to its own brave people and stop the indiscriminate attacks on civilians across the Middle East. I thank you. I will resume my function as President of the Council. The representative of Iran has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
I would be brief. A lot of these countries you mentioned in private tell us that they are compelled to be a co-sponsor of this resolution, and in really they are going to accept it. As I stated in my statement, it is an illegal and legitimate and aggressive war imposed on my country by the regime of the United States and Israel. The United States has violated UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. Iran is the victim of this war, not the aggressor. The aggressor is the US and Israel. As long as the Security Council remains unable to fulfill its responsibility to maintain international peace and security, Iran has no choice but to continue to exercise its inherent right to self-defense, to safeguard and defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as vital interests. Countries in the region, instead of blaming Iran, should place pressure on the true aggressor, the United States and Israel. The U.S., together with the Israeli regime, deliberately and indiscriminately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure across my country. One stark example of these heinous crimes is the killing of 170 schoolgirls in Minab. This constitutes a war crime. Just today, the U.S. announced its intention to target all ports facilities where Iranian naval forces operate. This action is a blatant war crime. Thank you.
There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. And this meeting is adjourned.